Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believe in a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
That's right. When you don't know what to do, just keep on breathing. From beautiful Huntington Beach, California, on the healthylife.net radio network, heard in all 50 states and 135 countries. All positive talk radio all the time. And from the Big Apple in New York City, welcome to all my listeners out there in radio land. I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver at caregiverdave.com, along with my lovely co-host, Adrienne Gruberg at the caregiverspace.org. Say hello, Adrienne.
Hi.
Hi. Also coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on numerous syndicated radio and podcast networks on 26 global audio video platforms. In fact, we're proud to be voted the #1 numero uno podcast on the top 50 of Player FM. And even more importantly, the #2 caregiver podcast on FeedSpot, one of the big raters of podcasts out of the top 60, and #2 on Caring Village. And we have an especially exciting show planned for you today, don't we, Adrienne?
I hope so.
We do, because it's you. It's Adrienne Gruberg, the co-host of the Caregiver Dave show for, I don't know, 4 years, 4.5 years. I don't even remember how long it's
7.
been. How many?
7.
Get out of here. Really?
6 at least.
Are you serious? My God.
Yeah, because I was in California in 2015.
Yeah, and remember you just says, well, we'll just do it and we'll see how it works out. And, don't know if I can continue doing it. It's like my partner at the gas station. I never wanted a partner. And my father said, never get a partner. But I needed somebody to work graveyard shift and they wanted to buy the station. I says, listen, work a graveyard shift for me. I'll pay you $10 an hour. And if it works out, I'll buy you out, you buy me out, whatever. And that was 15 years ago. So Go figure.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Adrienne, you are a former caregiver. And let's see here. You have a history. You just tell us your early history, when you were a teenager and becoming a young lady, because you have an amazing background. And you're like somebody's dream life well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to Africa. I'm going to, I don't even want to put words in your mouth. Tell us what Adrienne Gruberg was like when she was 18, becoming a young lady.
18, I was a sophomore in college. I got into college. I was in college at 16.
Oh, wow, you were smart.
No, that was just the way I skipped the 8th grade. Okay.
Wow, that makes you smart.
Well, the SP.
And you were 4.0 probably, right?
No, I was lucky to get through school.
Well, how does someone like that skip the 8th grade?
No, I was smart. I just didn't
get grades. Okay.
Going to school.
You were too smart for school.
I was an art student. Art classes were 3 hours long and real pain. I was not good at life drawing. I was very good at design. And that was what I wanted to do. But you had to have a full curriculum.
Did your family support you in your career for art? Were they artistic?
My family expected me to be an art teacher. And I told them under no circumstances. And they said, oh, no, you will be. And I said, oh, no, I won't be. And I wasn't.
And you were raised in a Jewish household?
I was raised in we were kosher. My brother is still kosher. Keeps kosher.
Very strict and disciplined. Very strict and disciplined, I assume.
Very disciplined. A lot of a lot of pressure from my mother to be perfect. That's a Jewish mother. My father was a doll. He had been a trumpet player professionally. He was the bugler in the army, boogie woogie bugle boy.
Oh boy!
And
Daddy's little girl, no doubt.
I never felt like that, but maybe I was. I don't know.
Jewish American princess?
Not at all. We were middle class, not upper middle class, not lower middle class, right down the middle. My father sold insurance. My mother was a bookkeeper, and she should have been an accountant. She was very smart.
What neighborhood in New York did you live?
I lived in a place called Stuyvesant Town, which was built. It's between 14th Street and 20th Street, First Avenue and Avenue C.
Did you go to Stuyvesant High School?
What?
Did you go to Stuyvesant High School?
At that point, it was an all-boys school. No,
Okay.
I did go to public
That's
school.
where Clint went.
Clint went to, interesting. Stuyvesant was across the street from the first house in Stuyvesant Town that we lived in.
Okay. It's a good neighborhood. Good neighborhood.
It was a mixed neighborhood. I had all sorts of, all ethnicities in school. Most of the Catholic kids in Stuyvesant Town went to the parochial schools. So you had a lot of Jewish kids. You had a lot of Latino kids, Black. There were European kids, or children. Certainly, my mother was from Romania.
All right. So when you graduated college, what happened?
I went to work at Harvard. It was a early learning program. It was really just a job to have while I was waiting to continue school, continue in the art program. But I got married. My high school friend wanted to come and visit me. I said, sure, come on. I didn't know it, but he wanted to marry me. He was really a Walter Mitty type. He had all these dreams, all these fantasies. And now, he lives in Zurich, Switzerland, and travels all over the world.
He's still alive.
Oh, yeah. Oh, please.
Well, I know your last husband died.
We were in the same class. I moved back to New York when I got engaged, and my grandfather died. My grandmother moved in with my parents, as happens in a lot of Jewish families.
Caregivers.
And they kicked me out of my room, and I was sleeping on an army cot in the living room.
Wow.
And I said, I'm getting married. I don't have to wait until August and have a big wedding. As far as I'm concerned, I can go to City Hall and get married.
Yeah.
And my mother had always dreamed of a big wedding because she had, an army kind of wedding, very small wedding during World War II. My in-laws lived in Florence, Italy. My father-in-law set up shoe factories for better shoes. My husband had gone to his first 2 years of high school in Florence. So he was on his way to living his Walter Mitty life. And he found in me somebody who was interested in what he wanted to do, which was study chimps.
Really?
And do mother-infant research. So we moved from New York to Atlanta. And in Atlanta, he went to Emory, which was then affiliated with the Yerkes Primate Center. That was the reason we went.
Did you know that you liked or wanted to do that, or just kind of
I
thought what he
was from a
did.
generation where you sort of, we were just coming into, women would just look, I'm a band the bra girl, you know. I mean, I was in sit-ins and, you know, it was an anti-Vietnam War world. I mean, I was in school in Boston from 1964 to 1968. Kennedy was assassinated the day that I was having my high school picture taken for the yearbook. So,
Did you burn your bra in those days?
no, I just watched other people. I didn't need one. So, when we moved to Atlanta, he went to school and did the Yerkes thing. And then we moved back to Brooklyn and he went to downstate college where there was a program where he was studying gelada baboons. And then the New York Blood Center approached him to go to Africa and set up a program to look for the cure for hepatitis B.
Wow.
And,
How'd you feel about going to Africa?
oh, I was excited.
Wow.
I mean, every day I would come home from work. I was a display artist back in New York when we moved to Brooklyn. And for a shoe company, one day we were moving to Borneo to study orangutans, and next day we were going to India to study gelada baboons and temple monkeys and macaques. And that's why I say he was a Walter Mitty type. There was always something. There were all these fantasies. And finally, one of them happened. We ended up going to Liberia for the New York Blood Center and studying. We were setting up a program to study chimps. The idea was we were going to set up a breeding colony to repopulate the Liberian forests with chimps.
Was there an endangered species situation going on?
I mean, Liberia is a poor country and people ate chimps, you know.
Wow.
So, and I mean, if somebody wanted to prove to us that there were chimps around, they would show us the skull from the soup pot. So, you know, that.
So didn't that just make more chimps available to eat by breeding them?
I guess.
Were laws passed to make it illegal?
Oh, like.
Or it was always
Liberia was
illegal?
the Banana Republic at the time. I mean, it was before the Civil War. It was a very corrupt country.
I got it.
We were 24 when we moved there. I mean, I had been the caregiver for my grandmother, my mother's mother. I would sit in the hospital, which they were still using oxygen tents back then. Mm. I looked older than I was, so they let me in. And I just sat there and I would take the subway up to the Bronx and sit with my grandmother, who didn't know I was there because she was unconscious. That happened. She was in the hospital a lot with her heart. Then I guess my next caregiving thing was in college. I came back from Boston for a holiday and my father was hospitalized with a bleeding ulcer. And I was there for him.
You were caregiver to chimps.
Well, actually, what I did in Africa was other than painting, which was one of the few times that I was able to just be an artist. And
so you have a lot of paintings of African stuff?
One. I did.
What were your paintings of?
I only did this one painting because we ended up having to leave because my husband's boss was manic depressive. Oh, wow. And we were in danger. He stole our car.
Oh my gosh.
He ran up bills up country in bars and put our name on the tickets.
Oh
and
my God.
People, so anyway.
How long were you in Africa?
My husband came back to New York to try and make the program work.
Mm-hmm.
I was left alone there. All of the people that were on our staff that I had taught to paint and weld and
You knew how to weld?
yeah, arc welding.
You're like that girl on Flashdance.
Yeah, I did a lot of different things.
How long were you in Africa and in Liberia and all those places?
I was only there for 10 months.
Okay, so
we were there for 2 months looking for a place. We started in Kenya. There really aren't chimps in Kenya.
Mm.
There are chimps in Uganda, but Idi Amin was in Uganda at the time, and you didn't want to go to Uganda. And Jane Goodall had Tanzania all locked up. So there was no way that we could do that. So we heard when we went to the very, very East Coast in Mombasa, there were programs in the Ivory Coast and maybe in Liberia. And Liberia was the one that panned out.
Mm. Listen, we're going to take a short break. Hold that thought, and we will be right back. Don't go away. I'm Dave Nasani. My fourth book, Secrets from the Hammock, Uncommon Wisdom for Uncommon Times, is a #1 bestseller on Amazon. As a young boy, I was told I possessed an unusual amount of wisdom for my age. As a young man, I found myself counseling friends and older family members whenever they needed answers to their problems. Then at 21, I read the Bible for the very first time and learned how King Solomon asked God for wisdom instead of riches, yet he received both. I was so impressed that I too asked God for wisdom. Soon after, I discovered when lying on my hammock, I would receive wisdom from God. This book is the result of my passion to share with the world wisdom's tremendous benefits. Join me as I reveal practical aspects of wisdom for the mind, body, and spirit. 31 lessons I learned from God that can change your life. Available in hardcover, Audible, Kindle, and paperback, wherever books are sold. I've spoken all over the country and London, and am available to speak at your event. Contact me at hammockwisdom.com. And hey, this is Caregiver Dave on the Caregiver Dave Show, and we're talking to usually my co-host, Adrienne Gruberg, because, nobody really maybe doesn't know anything about her. And so I wanted to, give her this opportunity while she's still alive and still healthy and still vibrant to let us know just who is Adrienne Gruberg and how did she get to be who she was. So,
well, it was complicated.
Yeah. Very exciting life. I mean, I know I've told you this a million times. You should write a book.
I'm writing memoirs.
Well, you better get them published.
I'm not even up to Africa yet. I'm still with my European grandparents who had such, their culture was so rich and things were so interesting. My grandmother had like 17 brothers and sisters. There were 2 mothers. One of the sisters died, and so the second wife was my great grandmother, and she had like another 8 children. So they ended up in South America and the United States. They had, when they left Romania.
Jewish people really take that verse, go be fruitful and multiply, very seriously, don't they?
So it was very colorful. I feel terrible that my niece and nephew will never know those people and that rich culture. Those people just aren't around anymore. So
that's why it has to live in a book, or maybe the book will become a movie. Who knows? I mean, they're making a movie about my life. Who'd ever figure that? Yeah, it's almost done. It'll be done in August. They just came to film the last little pieces. They want all my photographs, all my movies, to find a minute's worth of introduction for it. And then when they screen it in front of my family, they're going to take pictures of their reactions, seeing it for the first time, because I haven't seen it either. And that's going to be the final credits at the end.
That's good.
But your life is so much more interesting and exciting than my life. So, don't wait too long, Adrienne. This story has to be told.
Well, I'm telling it. So
yes. So this is going to be a very historic recording. So go on. What came next?
Let's see. When we came back from Africa, we had to leave Africa because Ken's boss was bipolar.
So the authorities were coming after you because your name was.
And the authorities were coming after us. And
did they ever arrest him or anything?
Oh no. I mean, I'm sure that everything was settled once we left. The program went on. It was a front page story on the New York Times 2 years ago. The program took a turn. Was not what we intended when we started the program. They ended up not sending chimps back to the United States for research work. That they did hold to that promise, but they put the chimps that they captured on an island, and the New York Blood Center had said that they would, I'm not telling tales out of school, this is what was on the front page of the Times, more or less contracted with the Liberian government to take care of these chimps forever and feed them, and they stopped doing it.
Were you guys being paid during this time from this crazy boss of yours?
Oh, you mean when we were over there?
Yeah, I mean.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, but I wasn't being paid. My husband was being paid. Okay, so we moved back to the United States because we had to. He worked for the New York Blood Center in the regional transplant program. This was kidney transplants. This was before computers. They would alternate who was on duty for the weekend because the transplant center would get a call from a hospital in Dubuque. We have a viable kidney and we're looking for a recipient, and the blood center had the list and they had to test for antigens and, make sure that everything matched up. But there were times that pilots from airplanes would bring kidneys to our front door, and we would have them on dialysis machines on our dining room table while we were waiting for a recipient for the kidney.
Wow.
It was that was also interesting. About 2.5 years after we moved back to the United States, my husband and I separated because, we were great friends. We sort of loved our life, but he was doing whatever he wanted to do, and I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. And I was going to be his mother and just follow my husband wherever he went.
Right.
So we split. And
was that divorce hard?
No.
As far as the family goes and your mother?
No. I think it was hardest for my mother because she had a lot of shame issues. But no, it was okay.
She tried to make you feel guilty, but you weren't gonna?
Oh, no. She was ashamed of what her friends and family would think.
Oh.
No. And she never blamed it on me. That's for certain. So 2 years after I got divorced, I met Steve. I dated people in the middle, but I was doing graphic design. I was working for a lucite manufacturer who, the place was called Two's Company. They became a very big company. And I did product design, packaging design, catalog design, all the artwork, all the mechanicals, display design, actual displays. I did all the patterns for the factories in China. I mean, there was a lot of stuff to do for one person. It was my first car, which is exciting. And I had to commute to work. It was a reverse commute, so I could zip out of the city and zip back to the city. After a year there, I met Steve.
Well, hold that thought. We'll talk about that right after the break. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Dave Nasani, the Caregiver's Caregiver, has just released his 6th book entitled It's My Life Too, Thrive to Stay Alive as a Caregiver. It was specifically written for caregivers who know they should be putting their needs first, but just don't know how. Dave is the sole caregiver to his wife, Charlene, since 1996. He knows firsthand what caregivers are going through, because he is one. He now speaks all across the country, offering caregivers his amazing caregiver support package. Even the airlines tell us that in the event of an emergency, to put your oxygen mask on first, before you help your child with their mask. They know that those who don't heed their advice often black out, thus becoming unable to help either themselves or their child. And caregivers are exactly the same way. It's My Life Too, Thrive and Stay Alive as a Caregiver will help caregivers who are neglecting their sleep, diet, and social life and learn to put their needs first. Pick up your copy today or buy one for your special caregiver, on sale everywhere and at caregiverdave.com.
Hey, I'm back. Caregiver Dave show. We're interviewing my co-host, Adrienne Gruberg, to find out what rich life she has and why she is who she is. Okay, so you're up to meeting Steve, your second
I'm up to meeting Steve. I was out on a Tuesday night. There's a thing in New York called the Museum Mile that they do in the summers where they close Fifth Avenue from the Guggenheim Museum, probably now the Jewish Museum, maybe even the Museum of the City of New York, all the way down to, I guess it's down to the Met. The Met's probably, no, then there's the Frick. So it's all the way down Fifth Avenue to the last museum that's on, and it's free. The museums are open at night, and they
still do that?
I think so. So I had done that, and I got home. I had moved from a 1-bedroom to a studio, which is probably the biggest mistake I ever made, because it was rent stabilized. I had a fireplace in a 1-bedroom apartment in a pre-war building that's very desirable. And it's in Chelsea, which became a very hot neighborhood. When we first moved there wasn't even a coffee shop. And now there are art galleries and the High Line, and it's the place to be. I turned on the TV when I got home, and I started channel surfing. I came to this character on Manhattan cable TV who was saying he wanted to meet someone who wasn't like the other bimbos that he'd been going out with. He was getting a divorce, and he wanted to meet somebody who was intelligent and good looking and funny. And I mean, he had a laundry list of things that he wanted. Forget about the character that he was, but there was a crawl going across the screen. Steve is available. Steve is available.
Steve is on the meat market.
So he said, call after the show. So I called the number after the show, and I just said, does this work for you? Because I had just seen a movie called FM, which was about a disc jockey who did this, and there were literally women banging down the door to meet this disc jockey. So
did he do this just one time, or? No,
Steve was the godfather of public access television. When he died, he had just done 35 years. And I took over the show after he passed away. And did the show for a couple of years.
Did he advertise for a mate this one time or a few
weeks? Oh, no. There was one time I broke up with him.
And he went back on the market.
because he gave me an ultimatum, and it's like, what are you talking about? This has never been exclusive. He was still sleeping with his wife, and
Wow.
I couldn't go out with somebody else if I wanted to. And there was somebody else who wanted me to be serious, who was 9 years younger than I was, and it was interesting. But I was only 31, so we got together on our first date. And on the first date, he said, you'd be a really good contestant on $20,000 Pyramid, because I was good with words. He said, why don't we do this? I'll train you. We'll play the game together. And if you win, I'll get 25% of what you win. And if I win when I'm on, you'll get 25% of what I win. And so it was okay. So as our relationship developed, we were training each other. Well, I was training for the audition, because you had to play the game to an audition. And I passed the audition. And from the minute I walked in, I knew that I was going to win. I just knew that I was going to win. I can remember being the first one that got there, sitting in a metal chair, looking at the school clock on the wall and saying, I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do this. And I did. I was on the show for 5 days. And my show aired on Christmas Day, which is when I won. It taped before Thanksgiving, but it was very exciting. And he got the money. But when he was on, I got a Mr. Coffee machine that eventually set my office on fire.
He didn't pay. Did he win?
He didn't win.
He got a coffee machine.
He choked. But he had won money on another game show. He was really into game shows, and I had been into game shows as a kid. My mother would take me to see live game shows, because television was live and coming from New York at the time. That was the beginning of our relationship. What I didn't know about, other than the fact that he was a compulsive gambler, who stopped gambling after we were together for 2 years. I had in my mind sort of said, okay, I'm giving this 3 years. If things don't change, I never asked him to stop gambling. But I figured if he was in a relationship that he thought was worthwhile, and he was with somebody who respected him enough, he was a brilliant guy, that he would stop. And he did. So we were together for, I didn't know he was a hypochondriac either. And that in and of itself turns you into a caregiver.
Sure.
Because you're constantly telling somebody, no, you're not dying, you're going to be all right. He was what they call the worried well. He was always going to doctors. At least he took care of himself, put it that way.
But the gambling, let me go back to the gambling.
Yeah.
Did he spend enough money on gambling that he was in financial need? He probably made a lot of money, but he had nothing to show for it.
No, he had nothing. He didn't make a lot of money.
Okay.
He took the $5,000 that he got from me from my winnings and was gambling with that. He wanted to parlay that into $100,000 so he could find a doctor that was going to make him better.
He lost it all, of course, right?
We went from the television studio when I won to a travel agency to book tickets to go to Las Vegas. That's where his head was at. Yeah. And then Atlantic City became something, and we
see. So this is heavy duty stuff. Listen, let's take another break. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Anytime we suffer loss, we grieve. And a lot of people don't realize what even the grief process is. But it could be 5 to 7 steps ranging from denial, I don't believe this is happening, anger, oh my gosh, I'm so upset this is happening, to a form of bargaining, how can I get out of this, to depression, which is a very serious thing because that often leads to suicide. And then finally, after you realize you have no more control over your situation and you're totally okay with the new normal that it brings, that wonderful, wonderful place called acceptance.
And we're back on the Caregiver Dave show, interviewing the amazing life of Adrienne Gruberg. So on this last segment, let's talk about how eventually the hypochondriac did get sick. Sometimes you can wish something on you, can't you?
See, the hypochondriac did think, I mean, he had migraines.
Did you at that time?
Yes, I had migraines too, but not in the first 10 years of our relationship, particularly. Every
Probably
now and
caught
then.
them from him.
Huh?
You probably caught it from him.
Oh, no, I had migraines since I was 4.5.
Okay.
Yeah, he had cluster migraines. Once he stopped smoking, they stopped.
Oh.
But the cluster migraines were real and they were awful. And yes, I was his caregiver through all of that. But he also had a motorcycle accident. He was basically standing still and a car knocked the motorcycle over on him and it tore his heel off.
Oh my God.
And I mean, I was really a caregiver then. I had to come back from work every single day, back to the apartment to change the dressing on his wounds. I had to change his bandages 3 times a day. Then there were episodes of diverticulosis and diverticulitis. And I mean, I had my share of caregiving.
How many years would you say you were a caregiver to him in some form or another?
32.
Oh my.
In some form or other?
Any regrets marrying him?
None. None.
You take the good with the bad.
You
The
take
good, the bad, the ugly.
And I mean, we didn't have kids, but
On purpose?
in 2005, he had a gastro problem that he started to self-medicate for because he'd had the problem before and he thought he knew what it was. He ended up with peritonitis, went to the hospital, the emergency room. He, of course, swore up and down he didn't want to. And I called the doctor and we were on the phone all day. And he said, just get him to the emergency room. Originally, they thought that it was appendicitis. So my doctor came in and said, you need a surgeon. I'll get you a surgeon. He got us a really good surgeon who finally got so fed up with what was going on in the hospital, in the emergency room. He took the gurney for Steve to get a CAT scan so he would know where to operate and what to operate on. In the scan, they found out he had cancer. They aimed a little too high, so they caught the lung cancer as well. He was in an induced coma for 6 days after he had the surgery for the peritonitis. When he was told he had the cancer, we had to see, I had to research online, and this is in 2005 when the internet was not what the internet is now. But I was able to do the research on surgeons and where to go, and we interviewed tons and tons of people. In the course of treatment, he ended up with a colostomy bag temporarily. So I went through that for about 4 months. After he has the colostomy bag off, we'll be able to do surgery on the first lung. The first surgery that he was going to need. Then he was going to need a second surgery, but it was stage 1A lung cancer. When they tell you the patient, Steve basically went into denial. And it wasn't that he didn't admit he had cancer. He was just going to live his life.
Yeah.
Of course, as soon as I heard it, and they said, after the surgery, you'll get better, but eventually it will kill you. Over my head, it's okay. What's the next? What's going to happen after? We were not married at that point.
Really?
We'd been together 26 years. When he came out from under the induced coma, he saw that I was still there.
Wow.
He said, I think we should get married. I said, I think you better ask me in another 3 days after the drugs have worn off. And we got married that summer. And after his first surgery, we went on our honeymoon. And then for the next 6 years, it was surgeries and treatment and this, that, and the other thing. And every time I was in a waiting room, I would see caregivers with their significant others or their patients if they were professionals. And I would think, yeah, I got to do something for these people.
Yeah.
And I called Gilda's Club. Gene Wilder set it up after Gilda Radner died of ovarian cancer. And they needed a commitment from me that I would be able to be there for at least 3 months, 3 hours a week in one of their groups. And I said, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to be here, and I felt that I should be able to make a commitment to a group, or I didn't have any right to be there.
This is a support group?
This is a support group. And that's what Gilda's Club was set up for.
Wow, I didn't know they made a commitment.
Cancer patients and their caregivers.
Wow.
It's a wonderful organization. They sent me to the American Cancer Society, who sent me to the Cancer Survivor Network, who had online communities, and I was involved in a chat every week. It was sacred. Oh, the one thing that I didn't mention yet is that after Steve was diagnosed, a year later, his mother was diagnosed with lymphoma at 89 years of age, and she came to move in with us. So I was taking care of 2 cancer patients at the same time.
And you were married at this point?
At that point, we were married, yeah.
Wow. You're a saint, Adrienne.
No, I'm not.
So it doesn't sound like the way you're describing Steve, that he was financially independent, but yet you're very comfortable. Where did all this money come from? Did he have a big insurance policy, or what happened?
No.
Did he finally hit the jackpot at the end of his life?
No, it wasn't the end of his life. Steve worked for Al Goldstein at Midnight Blue, which was the first adult cable program, and probably sold more cable boxes in New York City than anything else. I mean, basically, people were buying cable boxes.
It was very lucrative.
It was not lucrative. It was a vanity project. But
it made money.
No. Steve was hired by the co-creator of the show and the producer and director of the show, because Steve said, "You're not selling any ads. I can sell ads for you."
What
So-
kind of ads? What kind of advertisers did they have?
Sports services,
Okay.
the erotic bakery.
What's an erotic bakery, by the way?
An erotic bakery was a bakery that did suggestive cakes.
Suggestive cakes, like the writing of,
No, the shape of them.
the shape of them.
Yes.
Oh, they were artists.
They were artists.
Instead of
So-
a real woman popping out of a cake, they would just make, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
With
I never would have guessed.
Where Steve ended up hitting the jackpot was once telephone lines for sex talk
Yeah.
became popular. He advertised for them on his. He had
So,
more half hours on cable TV than anyone else, and he had 27 minutes of advertising and 2 minutes of programming, because that was what you had to have according to the New York City charter.
wait a minute. 27 minutes of advertising, just one ad after the other.
And 2 minutes of programming.
Oh my God.
And the programming started out being videos of Pong. I said, well, look, it's programming, it's something. So he would put 20 seconds of Pong on the screen.
So
and
he
then
would make his money from advertising dollars.
he made his money from cable advertising dollars.
So what was the average length of an advertiser's ad?
He had ads that were anywhere from 15 seconds to a minute.
And what would someone pay for a 15-second or a minute ad?
I really don't know. What I do know is you bought a package
I see.
because
That's smart.
there were so many shows. You had to buy a certain number of ads on each show, and you were placed in terms of how much you paid, where
Yeah.
you would be in the show and how many times you would have an ad on the show. And this was a very lucrative business for
Yeah.
the people that advertised, because men in New York in hotel rooms, salesmen
Yeah.
would go back to
Now,
their.
was this his baby, or he was working for somebody?
This was his baby. He
So
went to
he
Al
went into business
Goldstein.
for himself.
He went to Al Goldstein and said, "Do you want to do it?" And Goldstein said no. And then Steve
Really?
went to the other person at Midnight Blue and Screw and said, Al said no, but I'm going to ask you, do you want to get involved in this? And he said no. And Steve said, well, I'll tell you, I'm going to do it. And the one promise that I'll make is that if they advertise with me, they've got to advertise on Midnight Blue. That was okay with them. Eventually, Steve left Midnight Blue. And
He was doing two at the time.
yeah, but he continued to do his own show, which was advertising free.
All right.
This show was a call-in show where he was just funny and would take calls from people.
All right. So we've run out of time. And so let's find an appropriate way to end the show with your caregiving story. How do you want to end your story?
Well, there's life after caregiving. I have the Caregiver Space. I'm doing work that benefits a lot of people, and that is very satisfying.
You certainly are giving back.
Yes, I'm
Good for
giving
you.
back.
You're using your resources to change the world, which is
Well,
anybody's dream.
I'm doing what I can.
Yeah.
It's
Well, you spend a lot of money on the Caregiver Space. I know what you spend on that, and that's very, 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 very generous. And 3.5
years after Steve died, I knew that it was it was time for me to get another person in my life.
I'm hearing a baby screaming outside. I babysit on.
You're a babysitter.
Yes, I'm a babysitter.
Okay.
So how can people get a hold of you or find out more about the Caregiver Space?
It's Adrienne at the Caregiver Space. Don't forget the Z. It's the Caregiver Space. .org.
Okay.
And there's a website, the Caregiver Space. On Facebook has, I would say, at least 10 different groups now.
All right.
That are breakout chats. Everything is confidential, completely private. Things are really well written and very informative. The people online are very supportive and you get great advice if you ask for advice.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and for telling your story. And for everyone listening, please click the like button on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this interview on. It helps us reach even more caregivers by improving Google's search engine algorithms. And please don't forget my new book, Secrets from the Hammock, Uncommon Wisdom for Uncommon Times. And I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to give 50 free ebooks to the first 50 people who email me, because I know this is going out to a lot of places. And if you want your free ebook of Secrets from the Hammock, Uncommon Wisdom for Uncommon Times, email Dave at caregiverdave.com and I will send them to you. So we will see you next week. Same time, same channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing.